Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. R&B singer R. Kelly is found guilty on all 9 counts in his federal trial. He could be looking at life in prison. The man who tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan is set to be freed from all court supervision next June. A federal judge says he no longer has any mental illnesses or violent behavior. Healthcare workers in New York are now required to be vaccinated, and the governor is prepared to call in the National Guard to offset what could be a hospital staffing shortage. The CDC weighs in. The Biden administration is working to protect DACA. They just proposed a new rule that would reverse a court's decision to block new DACA applicants from joining the program. And China's new policies on energy consumption may decide when you can get your next iPhone. Several suppliers for Apple and Tesla have to halt production in China to comply with the new policies. Singer R. Kelly is facing life in prison after being convicted on all 9 counts in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The decision was announced this afternoon. Here are the details.
The star who sang "I Believe I Can Fly" was on trial for 5.5 weeks at a federal court in Brooklyn. He faced 9 charges, including racketeering and 8 counts of violating the Mann Act. The Mann Act prohibits transporting people across state lines for prostitution.
Today's guilty verdict forever brands R. Kelly as a predator who used his fame and fortune to prey on the young, the vulnerable, and the voiceless for his own sexual gratification.
It's not clear yet how long he will have to go to prison for. Possible sentences span from 10 to 100 years. Kelly has repeatedly denied sexual abuse accusations. His lawyers tried to show how some accusers stayed with Kelly long after the alleged abuses began, and they questioned why the victims failed to go to the police or waited years to come forward. On top of the conviction, Kelly still faces federal charges in Chicago on child pornography and obstruction, and state charges in Illinois and Minnesota.
The man who tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan in 1981 will be free from all restrictions and oversight next year. A judge in Washington, D.C. granted him unconditional release today. Here are the details.
U.S. District Court Judge Paul Friedman said Monday he would release John Hinckley Jr. from all court supervision next June. That's the man who shot and wounded President Ronald Reagan and 3 others in 1981. The judge will formally memorialize his decision later this week.
The judge has said that he's going to enter an order this week. He said he ruled from the bench that he's going to grant the unconditional release. And Mr. Hinckley will be monitored, as he has been over the years. There are very few conditions of the order that's in place now.
Hinckley has been living in Williamsburg, Virginia since 2016. The court at the time imposed many rules, including oversight by doctors and travel and internet restrictions. Now Hinckley will only have to show he's mentally stable and comply with the rules. And come next June, these restrictions will be gone.
I think it was well earned. I think John has done exceedingly well over a long period of time. His disease is in full remission. He's done nothing dangerous. There have been a multitude of risk assessments, and the risk of danger is exceedingly low.
A jury trial in 1982 found Hinckley not guilty by reason of insanity, but he later spent 3 decades at a psychiatric hospital. Judge Friedman says that Hinckley has displayed no symptoms of active mental illness, no violent behavior, and no interest in weapons since 1983.
President Biden got his COVID-19 booster shot on camera at the White House today. He says he's doing it publicly to show that it's safe. NTD's Allison Lee has more on the boosters.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
The FDA granted emergency use authorization last week to Pfizer's booster shot for 3 groups of people: those aged 65 and up, adults with high-risk health conditions, and adults who live or work in high-risk environments. President Biden says he's moving forward with vaccine mandates wherever he can.
On Wednesday, I'll be traveling to Chicago to talk about why it's so important that more businesses are instituting their own vaccine requirements.
To get the booster, people have to wait at least 6 months after their second Pfizer dose. And a reporter asked Biden what percentage of the population needs to get vaccinated for life to go back to normal.
I think we get the vast majority, like is going on in some industries and some schools, 97, 98%. I think we're awful close. But I'm not the scientist. I think, but one thing for certain, a quarter of the country can't go unvaccinated, and that's not continue to have a problem.
The CEOs of both Pfizer and Moderna say they believe life could go back to normal by next year, and Pfizer's CEO is predicting annual booster shots. Here's what he told ABC's This Week on Sunday.
It is that because the virus is spread all over the world, that we will continue seeing new variants that are coming out, and also we will have vaccines that they will last at least a year. And I think the most likely scenario is annual revaccination.
So far, the CDC recommends only the Pfizer booster, but they are expected to also recommend booster shots from Moderna and J&J in the coming weeks. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Pfizer says it's planning to ask for authorization of a COVID-19 vaccine for younger children, kids ages 5 to 11. Here are the details.
Pfizer's CEO says the company plans to apply to the FDA for use of its vaccine in younger children.
If they approve it, we will be ready with our manufacturing to provide this new formulation of the vaccine.
For months, Pfizer has been testing 1/3 of the dose now given to adults in children ages 5 to 11. The company says this formulation is safe for that age group, but the FDA and CDC will have the final say.
As soon as they get submitted to the FDA, I know the FDA is urgently planning to review these data. It will go from the FDA to the CDC, and we will review it with similar urgency, and I'm hoping in the order of weeks.
Before a green light can be given for this vaccine in younger children, there's a lot of data to comb through. But one health expert says if Pfizer applies this week, a decision could come by the end of October.
This is a vaccine for children, so getting the dose right in terms of both efficacy and side effects is crucial.
Right now, Pfizer's vaccine is only approved for use in people 12 and older.
I wouldn't be so cavalier about this virus. We know that this virus has long-term consequences in a lot of people who contract it, including children.
Concerns are growing that hospitals, especially those in rural areas, are going to face significant staff shortages due to federal and state vaccine mandates for healthcare workers. Today, the head of the CDC acknowledged the situation is creating a challenge. Here are the details.
CDC Director Rochelle Walensky was asked Monday about the effectiveness of vaccine mandates in the light of the tens of thousands of unvaccinated healthcare workers who could potentially lose their jobs in New York. Walensky told Good Morning America that vaccine mandates do get more people vaccinated and added that the more people get vaccinated, the more communities are protected. But she was pressed on whether this benefit outweighs the loss to hospitals.
But if we're losing healthcare workers potentially in the process, does that actually create a safer environment in our hospitals?
It absolutely creates a challenge. What I would say is to have these, to do some work to educate these healthcare workers, to meet them where they are, to understand where their hesitancy is, so we can get them vaccinated and get them back to work.
Over the weekend, the head of Goodall-Witcher Hospital in rural Texas told NPR that his hospital may have to stop delivering babies due to a loss of nurses. CEO Adam Willman said a number of experienced nurses, including in the hospital's maternity ward, aren't vaccinated and don't plan on getting the shot. He said some nurses say they will retire or find other work rather than get the vaccine. About 30% of his 250 staff members remain unvaccinated. But despite the mandate, the CEO said they're kind of at that point where everybody that's willing to get it got it. Tom Mee, CEO of the North Country Healthcare System in New Hampshire, said it's likely other rural hospitals will have staffing issues due to the mandate. He told NPR that he's never seen anything like this in his 34 years of working in healthcare. In the last few weeks, a hospital in upstate New York had to temporarily stop delivering babies after several nurses resigned rather than get the shot. And more dramatically, the head of a medical center in rural Texas warned that his entire facility would likely shut down due to the loss of unvaccinated staff. The head of the National Rural Health Association is urging the Biden administration to come up with a plan to help rural hospitals, such as drawing workers from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Public Health Service, or the National Guard.
And time's nearly up for healthcare workers in New York. The governor's left them with an ultimatum: get vaccinated or lose your job. The state's now preparing for a potential staff shortage. And if it comes to this, the governor may put members of the National Guard in scrubs. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Governor Kathy Hochul's preparing to call in members of the National Guard to offset a potential shortage.
I'm hopeful I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this if people will get vaccinated. There's plenty of hours left in the day. But I also know I need to be prepared.
New York data says about 72,000 hospital workers have yet to be fully vaccinated. They need at least one dose or face termination by the end of Monday. Governor Hochul says this hardline approach, initially ordered by the former governor, is meant to protect New Yorkers.
I think showing some flexibility on the policy is almost inevitable.
Bill Hammond is a senior fellow for health policy at the Empire Center, a good government think tank. Hammond says he agrees with the mandate's vaccination goal, but the governor has other options that avoid activating the National Guard.
New York did it a couple springs ago because we had a really serious outbreak of COVID that was, absolutely overwhelming some of our hospitals. To do it now in the context where this is a self-inflicted disaster, or a self-inflicted crisis, I should say, that's created by a state rule that the state is free to change. They could extend the deadline. They could create a testing option where you can continue working if you wear a mask and you test. They have options that that aren't as extreme and don't involve the disruption of, bringing in National Guard help.
Governor Hochul said she can also allow out-of-state and country medical professionals to work in New York. Now, some hospitals are reportedly suspending unnecessary surgeries to make sure they have doctors where they really need them in case they are short-staffed. So earlier on Monday, the head of New York City's public hospitals said that 5,000 out of 43,000 hospital workers weren't vaccinated. Now, the mayor says these public hospitals will be okay. The state's order says hospital workers have until the end of Monday to get vaccinated. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
And it's not just healthcare workers who are resigning over vaccine mandates. The president of the State Police Association in Massachusetts says dozens of state troopers have submitted their resignations ahead of the deadline to comply with the state's mandate. Many of the troopers will return to their local departments, which allow for regular testing instead of vaccines. This comes after a Massachusetts court rejected the union's request to delay the mandate. And the Biden administration is taking action to reinstate the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. Today, announcing a new rule that aims to continue accepting DACA applicants after new applications were blocked under a federal court ruling over the summer. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more details from D.C.
Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas assured that this new rule will preserve and fortify DACA, an Obama-era program that prevents deportation for illegal immigrants who came to the states under 16 years old. But DACA was declared unconstitutional because a Texas federal judge ruled that the Obama administration unlawfully created the DACA program through executive action, skipping Congress. This July court ruling blocked new applicants from joining DACA. But the Biden administration now trying to reinstate DACA, introducing virtually the same exact 2012 program as a new rule.
Judge Hainan also said DACA itself cannot be cured, meaning you can't correct it. You can't make DACA legal through rulemaking. Only Congress can give immigration benefits to a whole class of people, and in this case, a whole class of illegal aliens. So when I saw that they were proposing this regulation, to me, it seems like they are not actually adhering to what Judge Hainan said. They're just going forward anyways.
Congress has attempted and failed to pass a law to grant citizenship for illegal immigrants, including the 600,000 DACA recipients. Democrats argue that DACA is necessary because the U.S. has an obligation to protect illegal immigrants from deportation, citing their contribution to the nation's economic success.
Fixing our broken immigration system is a moral imperative. It's also an economic imperative because immigrants are so important to our economy. Talk about shortage of workers.
While Republicans and those who oppose DACA say programs like this have a chain migration effect.
Once you start giving out the benefit, more people will come, the pressure will build to say, we've got to do something about this population as well. And then either you have a new version of DACA that changes the cutoff date or a brand new program that looks and acts very, very similar to it.
Now, congressional Democrats have tried to include immigration reform in their budget bill, but the Senate Rules Advisor says they can't do it this way. They can't include immigration policy changes in a budget bill. So that's been a hurdle for Democrats here on Capitol Hill. But with the Biden administration proposing this new rule, DACA applicants will be able to start applying for the program again. The Department of Homeland Security is proposing this new rule on Tuesday, after which the public will have 60 days to comment on it. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The New York City Council is considering a bill that would allow permanent residents to vote in municipal elections. The non-citizens would need to have lived in the city for at least 30 days. NTD's Jason Perry attended an event with council members who oppose the bill.
We are here in New York City, right outside of City Hall Park, where people have gathered in a rally to stand against a bill that will allow non-citizens to vote in New York City. And that bill already has a lot of support.
But to open up our elections to non-citizens is a step too far.
Let's say up to 900,000 foreign nationals would get the right to vote. Imagine that. They could sway elections and not be a citizen of the United States. That's absurd.
Councilman Robert Holden says there could be other motives behind the bill.
Now, I won my race, my first race in 2017, by 137 votes. So you see what a bill like this could, you can have foreign nationals affecting an election and determining an election of where really they don't live. They've only been here 30 days. So this is a very dangerous bill. So if it ever gets a foothold, God help us.
Chairman of the New York State Republican Committee, Nick Langworthy, also spoke against non-citizens being able to vote.
We have to have the rule of law first and foremost. I mean, and this goes back to our opposition to why, New York City is a sanctuary city. I mean, we have federal immigration laws. There's a lot of people that came here and followed the right path and became, full American citizens. With that comes the right to vote. We're not looking to deny anybody, but citizenship matters. There's not two tracks to citizenship.
Those in support of the bill say if non-citizens are able to vote, it will allow officials to be elected who will better represent the residents of that district. Although this bill to allow non-citizens to vote has a lot of support, others are saying it goes directly against the state constitution and therefore it wouldn't be able to pass. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
At least 3 people are dead and many more injured after an Amtrak train derailed in northern Montana. The derailment occurred Saturday afternoon and over 140 people were on board. Federal investigators found today that the train was going just under the 75-mile-per-hour speed limit when the incident took place.
The train was running from Chicago to Seattle when 8 of its cars derailed in northern Montana. People trapped aboard soon after the derailment have all been taken off the train.
Like immediate shock when we got off because we didn't know anything that significant had happened. Yeah, from then on, it was kind of a lot of chaos. The reaction from passengers was definitely mixed. There was like a wide range of ages and stuff. So, and a wide range of experiences.
There were multiple injuries, but no final count. 5 people had to be hospitalized, while many others only needed minor treatment. The Empire Builder train derailed about 4 p.m. near a small town located about 30 miles south of the Canadian border. Residents came to the accident site after hearing about it. They helped people who were stuck to get off the train, even bringing the passengers to where they needed to go. The cause of the incident was not immediately clear. Officials are asking people to stay away from the site so investigators can find out more about what happened.
Facebook is pausing its plans to create a children's version of the popular photo-sharing platform Instagram. This after the effort drew bipartisan pushback from dozens of attorneys general. NTD's Arlene Richardson has that story.
Anna Mosseri, head of Instagram, announced in a blog post Monday that the Facebook-owned company is pausing the development of its Instagram for 10 to 12-year-olds. Mosseri said the company still believes building the children's version is the right thing to do, but is pausing the work to consult with parents, experts, and policymakers, as well as demonstrate the value of the project. Earlier this year, a bipartisan coalition of 44 attorneys general urged Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to abandon plans to create the platform. They noted that studies have shown that using social media can be detrimental to the health and well-being of children. The attorneys general also said children don't have a developed understanding of privacy and pointed to risk of online predators. Mosseri addressed some of the concerns, saying the children's Instagram will require parental permission to join and will have age-appropriate content and features. Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn is calling the pause a step in the right direction to ensuring a safe environment, but says there's still much work to be done. Blackburn, along with Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal, is conducting an investigation into Facebook's knowledge of the negative impact of Instagram on teenage users. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, healthcare workers in Monterey, California protest against vaccine mandates. Attendees share their stories and explain why they're not getting the vaccine. Soon, California healthcare workers will need to be fully vaccinated. Hospital staff and their families in Monterey held a rally to express their opposition to vaccine mandates. NTD's Cynthia Kai spoke with some nurses to hear their stories.
On Sunday, a group of approximately 100 people held a rally to protest vaccine mandates, asking for freedom of choice. A pregnant nurse is choosing not to be vaccinated to protect her unborn child.
Definitely feeling undermined, definitely feeling like, I was the first to volunteer to take all these patients, and I'm still volunteering to take them, even though I'm unvaccinated. I have no problem. I signed up to be a nurse. I signed up to take care of people.
Another nurse said she contracted COVID during work at the hospital. She explained the hospital failed to provide her with N95 masks while she cared for a COVID patient on New Year's Eve.
I still have trouble breathing. I've complied with everything that CHOMP has asked of me. I wear an N95 for 8 hours.
A hospital technician described how he received one dose of the vaccine but experienced cardiac complications. His physician advised against a second dose.
The right to be able to listen to one's physician. That's what we entrust with physicians. We build that relationship with physician-patient, and you trust them to make the right decision for you. That's what they went to school for. That's what they're trained for.
He filed for a medical exemption, which is still under review. Some staff have requested religious exemptions, citing their faith.
I've also put in for a religious exemption because I sincerely believe that this is wrong to be forced to do this, and that the state mandate allows me to wear a mask and get tested twice a week like I am now.
Some staff mentioned the state order, which allows exempt employees to continue working.
It's so sad that we're having to test, but the vaccinated isn't having to test. And they're having mild symptoms and they're still coming to work.
So the only accommodation we're being given is 6 months of unpaid leave with no protection over our job.
Nurses expressed concern for future staffing capabilities.
By forcing us to go through with this mandate and choosing our livelihoods or getting the shot, that they're actually forcing the quality nurses out of nursing.
This Friday is the deadline for California healthcare workers to be fully vaccinated, per the California Department of Public Health's August 5th order. Staff with exemptions would be required to test weekly and wear N95 masks to continue working in healthcare facilities. However, Montage Health, based in Monterey, has a stricter policy. In an email to NTD, Montage only grants remote staff exemptions, while in-person staff are granted a 6-month leave of absence. Montage Health CEO Stephen Packer believes a 100% vaccination rate is necessary to protect patients. Approximately 60 to 70 hospital employees are now filing a lawsuit against Montage Health over its vaccine mandate policies. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
And now to Houston, where audiences cannot get enough of classical Chinese dance performances by Shen Yun, the company adding another show to their original 6. Culture enthusiasts Barbara and Winston Elliott left the show in awe. Here's what they have to say.
The Brown Theater in Houston's Wortham Center waited for months for the return of Shen Yun, and 6 shows wasn't enough to satisfy the eager audience.
I thought they were spectacular. First of all, the athleticism is just really, I know how hard it is to do some of the things that they did. So I'm in awe of just the technical brilliance, but they express an inner beauty as well, an inner light, the inner masculinity, when the men are there, and the femininity in the women, but also an indomitability.
It's quite pleasing to the eye and pleasing to the ear, and which is pleasing to the soul.
Shen Yun's mission is to revive traditional Chinese culture, including spirituality and faith. The Chinese communist regime sees it as a threat.
I wish there were a lot more like them in every culture that exists on the face of the earth. And I really particularly enjoyed the direct anti-communist poke. That kind of brutal violence, that kind of terrorizing people, that kind of forcement. I know that. I know it in my bones from the years that I spent basically with them and learning about them. So that part of the show really resonates with me too, in a unique way.
The fact that this company exists to do that performance and to bring in people who both know the culture and people who have never been introduced to the culture, that's very important, and they're not going to find it anywhere else. So.
The Elliots said the show feeds their soul.
Very inspirational and hopeful, which is not a word we use very much today. There seems to be a shortage of hope. So today, in this performance, there was much hope, and that is great.
Shen Yun is performing all over the country for the rest of the year and into next year. Their next stop is Seattle, Washington.
Coming up, Chinese state-run media is cheering the return of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou, calling it a major victory for the Chinese people and a powerful China. But it's leaving out important details on the conditions of her release. Now, are you planning on getting a new iPhone? It may not arrive on time. Apple supply chains are now at risk because some suppliers need to suspend production in China. Find out more here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. Communism promises a world without suffering, and yet, in its execution, does the exact opposite. Following Lenin's death, Stalin's 29-year reign killed an estimated 60 to 66 million people. More famines and purges would occur. The very peasants that communism was supposed to benefit instead starved to death under its rule. The party dictates what is right and wrong. Mao ended up killing between 50 million and 70 million people. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.
In a major move for international relations, Canadian authorities have released Chinese telecom giant Huawei's CFO, Meng Wanzhou. And on the other end, Chinese authorities released 2 detained Canadian citizens, dubbed Canada's 2 Michaels, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Given the close proximity of the releases, some analysts are describing the move as Chinese hostage diplomacy. NTD's Don Ma has more.
Mere hours after Chinese telecom giant Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou was released, China released the 2 Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. It's leading observers to wonder if Chinese authorities arrested the 2 Canadians only because Canadian authorities had arrested Meng. The Chinese Foreign Ministry denies any relation between the arrests. Their spokeswoman said the Michaels were released for health reasons. But U.S. current affairs commentator Tang Jingyuan says this is a hostage exchange.
This time, the CCP has not concealed its hostage diplomacy, allowing the international community to see at least 2 problems clearly. The first is that the CCP is a criminal regime without a bottom line. It will not take into account any international ethics and will not abide by any international rules. When necessary, the CCP can use any criminal means without any concealment.
The condition of Meng's release was that she would admit that she misled banks in doing transactions that violated U.S. sanctions on Iran. The admission was part of a deal that the U.S. Department of Justice made with Meng. It's called the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, which the CFO signed. She agreed to it on Friday last week, where she appeared in U.S. federal court. The court's acting attorney Nicole Beckman said in a statement that, in entering into the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, Meng has taken responsibility for her principal role in perpetrating a scheme to defraud a global financial institution. Despite signing the agreement, Meng pleaded not guilty in court. Tang says her signature trumps her plea.
The fact that she admitted to all the alleged crimes is independent of whether she herself verbally says that she pleads guilty or not. The agreement she signed will be a key piece of evidence against Huawei, including her father, Ren Zhangfei. So Meng Wanzhou became a tainted witness in exchange for the U.S. Department of Justice delaying her prosecution.
Tang Jingyuan also believes that Beijing is using Meng Wanzhou's release to push the narrative that China is a powerful country. On Monday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that the DOJ coming to an agreement with Meng does not mean a change in U.S.-China policy. She says the U.S. will continue to hold China accountable for its human rights abuses. Don Ma, NTD News.
And Meng Wanzhou touched down in China on Saturday. Chinese state-owned media outlets are calling it a win for China. NTD's Don Ma brings us more details.
CFO of Chinese telecom giant Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, received a hero's welcome upon arriving at China's Shenzhen airport. Chinese state-run media is hailing her return as a major victory for the country and the Chinese people. But state media seems to be leaving out important details about the terms of her release. What paved the way to her returning to China was that she had to admit wrongdoing, that she misled banks in doing transactions that violated U.S. sanctions on Iran. Despite Meng's admission, state-run newspaper The People's Daily is labeling the incident one of so-called political persecution. Chinese media heralded her return. She received a grand red carpet reception upon arrival, and Meng took that opportunity to praise the Chinese Communist Party. In a speech at the airport, she offered her gratitude, saying, "Where there's a 5-starred red flag, there's a beacon of trust and faith. If trust and faith has a color, it must be Chinese red." Chinese state media is also mentioning very little about Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. They were arrested by Chinese authorities shortly after Meng was arrested in Canada. Beijing denies that the 2 Michaels were detained in retaliation, but after Meng's release on Friday, China let the 2 Canadians go just hours later. China's foreign ministry told Canada to learn from the incident and not perform what it called dirty work for the U.S. Meng was arrested in 2018 in Vancouver on a U.S. warrant for wire and bank fraud charges. Don Ma, NTD News.
Several Apple and Tesla suppliers have suspended production in China. It's to comply with Beijing tightening energy consumption. But the regime's policies are putting supply chains at risk during the peak season for electronics.
Apple could face production problems just as the peak festive shopping season looms. Several key suppliers have suspended output at Chinese factories for some days. They say it's to comply with tighter energy consumption policies imposed in the country. China is also grappling with tight coal supplies, which have triggered a contraction in industrial production in several regions. Apple supplier Unimicron Technology said late Sunday that 3 of its China subsidiaries had stopped production. It said that was to comply with local government's electricity limiting policy. Concraft Holding, which makes speaker parts for iPhones, said it had stopped output for 5 days. Reuters sources say Foxconn, which makes many of Apple's handsets, had to adjust production at one plant. The stoppages were also hitting suppliers to Elon Musk's electric car brand Tesla. It's already been grappling with the global shortage of computer chips. However, major Chinese chip makers TSMC and UMC said their China facilities were still operating for now.
Coming up, Germany's left-leaning Social Democratic Party won the most seats in parliament after Sunday's federal elections. But it's still unclear who will succeed Chancellor Angela Merkel. And in the UK, gas stations are running dry as a shortage of truck drivers disrupts the supply chain. The government urging drivers to stop panic buying. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD. Germany's Social Democrats narrowly won Sunday's national election. That's according to projected results. And they claimed a clear mandate to lead a government for the first time since 2005 and to end 16 years of conservative-led rule under Angela Merkel.
Germany's Social Democrats narrowly won a milestone election on Sunday, a victory that marks an end to 16 years of conservative rule under Angela Merkel. Projected results showed the center-left Social Democrats were on track for 26% of the vote, ahead of nearly 25% for the conservative bloc, though both groups believe they could lead the next government. SPD's candidate for Chancellor Olaf Scholz thanked his supporters.
And of course, I'm very happy about the election result that the citizens of this country have chosen. They have decided that the SPD should rise upwards, and that is a big success.
Scholz would become the 4th Socialist Democrat chancellor since World War II. His conservative rival, Armin Laschet, signaled his bloc was not ready to concede, though his supporters were more subdued.
We will do everything possible to build a conservative-led government because Germany now needs a future coalition that modernizes our country.
The most likely outcome is a three-way alliance involving the smaller Greens and liberal Free Democrats, led by either the Social Democrats or Merkel's Conservatives. A new coalition could take months, and Merkel will remain in charge in a caretaker role while Scholz and Laschet court the support of the smaller parties. They have both said they aim to form a coalition before Christmas.
The gasoline crisis continues in the UK, with thousands of filling stations running out of fuel on the weekend. The government is asking motorists to stop panic buying and says there's no current plan to use the army to drive tankers. Here's NTD's Joey Duguid with the story.
Thousands of petrol stations ran dry over the weekend. Environment Secretary George Eustace calls on drivers to stop panic buying.
Petrol, both in refineries, output is at normal levels, and we have plenty of petrol in stores. And the most important thing is that people just buy petrol as they normally would. There isn't a shortage. The cause of these current problems is that panic buying episode.
Eustace denies that Brexit played a part in the crisis.
Certainly, I think the biggest factor in all of this has been COVID. We're seeing it around the world, disruption to supply chains, shortages of labour, quite a bit of turbulence actually as the whole world comes out of this pandemic.
He says the government has no current plans to use the army to drive petrol tankers.
But we always have a civil contingencies section within the army that's always on standby should they be needed, but we don't judge that's necessary at the moment.
Industry leaders warn drafting in the army will not end the fuel crisis, but the Environment Secretary confirms the Ministry of Defence is helping resolve the HGV driver shortage.
We are bringing MOD trainers in to accelerate some of the HGV training. To clear a backlog of people who want to carry out those tests.
Long queues at petrol stations continue. In London, drivers express their frustration at not being able to fill their tanks.
It's ridiculous, you know, I've just turned up, going to work normally, got 20 miles of fuel left because can't get any in Milton Keynes where I actually live. Come down here, you've just got to get in the queue now, haven't you?
I need fuel. I was meant to be at work at 8 o'clock, look what time it is right now. It's terrible. I tried to come here last night, same thing. Went to 3 different petrol stations, all closed.
Over the weekend, the government suspended competition laws to allow the industry to share information. Oil companies can then target areas where fuel supply is running low. The government is also creating 5,000 3-month visas for foreign lorry drivers in an attempt to ease the driver shortage. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
Hundreds of fishermen demonstrated in northern France on Friday. This follows the government's plan to create several maritime wind farms in Normandy. NTD's Coast Jimenez brings us the details.
French fishermen marched through Normandy on Friday, dumping fish at authorities' offices to denounce offshore wind farms they say would damage their livelihoods.
What's happening today is that the fishing industry is completely fed up. There was Brexit, Jersey, meshing rules, and now the wind farms, of course, which removes fishing zones from us, which will destroy everything, and I don't think the government realise it.
Fishermen say wind farms could drive away their catch or kill existing species with the noise they emit.
If you put a wind farm 500 metres away from a fishing trawler, it emits about 200 decibels. The fish will not survive. No species, no shellfish, nothing will survive. They will destroy everything. That's all they'll do.
The government defends the wind farms as a source of clean energy and job creation. They aim for the facilities to be operational by 2027. The fishermen don't share the government's optimism.
We'll find ourselves with boats that are no longer profitable because we can no longer go out to sea, especially if we can no longer catch anything. Owning a trawler is a business. We have to earn money, and for that we have to go out to fish. And if we can no longer fish because there are wind farms everywhere, because there are no fish anymore, no shellfish at the bottom of the sea because everything left, everything died because of the mess of the wind farms, then it's over.
About 60 trawlers also took to the sea with fishermen raising lit flares in Friday's demonstration in Cherbourg-en-Cotentin. Coast Jimenez, NTD News.
Coming up, hot air balloons rising with the sun drew spectators in California this weekend. Many performers also joined the scene. And a French bread competition brings out the best in Parisian bakers. An award-winning baker shares his recipe for a delicious traditional French baguette. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new Precious Metals IRA. Call now.
As autumn approaches, the Central Valley in California held its annual community event over the weekend. It draws in thousands each year. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
Here at the Clovis Fest weekend in Fresno County, they start off each morning with hot air balloons. So as you can see, these balloons are the main attraction that bring in locals to the area.
As you can see, the community really likes coming out. We drove 50 miles to come here today just to see these balloons and to have a little bit of a lift, if you will, just like the balloons are. And you have everything from professionals to hobbyists.
You'd be surprised how many people are talking to you when you're up here. You can hear them very well, even at like 1,800 feet. You can still have a conversation with somebody. Sound travels up. I can hear dogs and roosters and you name it up at 3,500 feet. It's incredible.
Fernandez says she's been a balloonist for almost 6 years. She tells us how intense the fire can get compared to a 2,000 square feet home.
This is a 105 cubic balloon, and it has about 7 of those homes in it. And I can heat all 7 in about 15 seconds. Kabam!
Over at the downtown area, dozens of vendors can be seen with jump houses and a petting zoo.
I love watching the little children riding the ponies. They get so excited and they love it. It's a lot of fun. It really is.
This is Clovis Fest's 46th annual event. A variety of craft vendors, festival foods, and cultural performances take the stage.
I saw it, I told my parents I wanted to try it out because it looked fun, and then I did it, and I fell in love with it, and this is how I ended up here.
The dancers wear clan outfits. One of the dancers says they have machine-made and handmade attire.
And it is called Meng, so we have stripes on our outfit, and we also have colorful pom-poms on our hats, and the stitching here is called bando.
Another dancer says they prepare about 4 to 5 hours before an event.
Woke up at 5 this morning just to get ready for this.
She said her culture originated from China and then migrated to Laos and Thailand.
Even though that land didn't belong to us, we wanted some place, to just belong, to call a place home, to call people family. And we also have our coins, which originated from France.
Clovis Fest was closed last year due to the pandemic, but locals are glad it's back.
And we're just happy to get closer to the back to normal, to see the whole community come out and do something that they've been doing for the past 40 years, right?
Reporting in Clovis, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
A special committee in Paris has just selected the city's best baguette. Part of a yearly competition, every quality from taste to appearance and even sound are taken into account. NTD's David Vives met with a former winner of the award for some of the secrets to baking a perfect baguette.
It is said that bakers must wake up before even the birds to start their day's work. But that's no problem for Sébastien Mauvieux, who says he has both passion and a taste for hard work. For the past 6 years, he's owned a bakery in Montmartre.
When I was young, I used to bake pastries with my mother. Then I started to love bread as well.
Mauvieux participated in Paris' Best Baguette competition, which selects and awards the city's top bread makers. He didn't win this time, but remains a serious challenger, as he already won the 2012 trophy. Bakers define their baguette recipe via the technique, by how long they let the dough rest, or by adding more yeast. And Mauvieux also shared some tips.
Making a baguette only requires water, salt, yeast, and flour. As for us, we use the autolysis technique. We blend water and flour and let it rest for 4 hours.
Despite the abundance of industrial bread baking, many in France remain faithful to the artisanal baker. That's based on comments from the head of the Paris Bakers Union. According to Mauvieux, a good baguette needs time. He puts his dough in a cold room to build its aroma and leaves it to rest overnight before baking. The next day, after 16 minutes at 420 degrees Fahrenheit, the results inspire hunger in anyone passing by. But how do you recognize a good baguette?
So first, you need to have nice cuts, as you see here. The color, it has to look well cooked. The interior, it has to have these holes, be soft, The color must not be white, but more like a cream color. And then you have the noise. Listen. Crispy.
His bakery welcomes a lot of tourists too. Some of them also share tips on how best to enjoy their Baguette creations.
You have to buy 3. The first one you eat as you're walking home. The second one is for your meal, and the third one goes into the freezer.
According to a poll, 87% of French people say they always have bread at home, and 48% say they can't do without it. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
A sculpture by Michelangelo is being unveiled to the public in Florence after an intense restoration process. Art historians believe the 2-year project reveals new insights into the Italian sculptor's work. Here's NTD's Neil Woodrow with more on this.
Michelangelo carved the Pietà, which is now in the Museo dell'Opera, as a personal expression of his religious spirit. It was meant for his tomb, and he included his self-portrait. So it's a deeply personal work that he intended to express his spirit even after he died. He was very old when he began. He was 80 when he stopped working on it.
Art historians have always identified Michelangelo's marble with the white marble from Carrara, one of the world's most prestigious. But according to Paolo Rosa, the main restorer of the Pietà, it actually originated somewhere else. She believes the stone came from a quarry in northern Tuscany's Seravezza, a much less noble kind of marble.
The fact that it was from Seravezza means that the marble has specific peculiarities that Vasari, in his first reliable essay on art history, considered hard, impure, and producing sparks at every chisel blow.
The board of the Opera del Duomo offered visitors the opportunity to follow the restoration process minute by minute.
When Opera di Santa Maria del Fiore
decided to start the restoration of the Florentine Pietà by Michelangelo Buonarroti, also known as Pietà Bandini, we chose to start an open worksite, allowing all visitors to follow the live works, to evaluate the progress, to grab all the details that the restoration could offer.
Di cogliere tutti I dettagli che il restauro poteva offrire.
Weighing nearly 6,000 pounds and standing over 7 feet, the Pietà Bandini takes its name from one of the families that originally owned the piece. It was carved in the mid-16th century and left unfinished by Michelangelo. Originally meant to decorate his tomb in Rome, the Pietà is now part of the heritage the artist left to the city of Florence. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.